There you go.
Welcome to the Franklin to the Ford and Southgate Triangle Neighborhood Council Forum for candidates running for mayor of Missoula. Can you hear me? I'm Sarah Busey, representing the League of Women Voters. I'll be your moderator, and the League was asked by the leadership team to help moderate this forum. No candidate has been involved in the planning of the event or the selection of questions, which have been developed by your neighbors at their regular neighborhood council meeting. The questions have not been shared ahead of time with the candidates, so it'll be a surprise. I also might make note there will be 6 questions. Each candidate will have an opportunity to answer each of the 6 questions, but they will be in different orders. So we're hoping that, and we won't get a lot of, I agree with him, and pass it on. They'll develop the answers in much more depth. I also, just to make everyone feel a little bit more relaxed here at the table, to assure you that none of the 6 questions relate to the sign ordinance.
Oh, that's a blessing.
Nice shot, sir.
Question.
I know you did. We hope you'll find this event fair and balanced. The League is a nonpartisan political organization. We do not support candidates, but do and have provided voter service, voter education activities, such as this forum, for over 50 years. Word about the format. First, the candidates will have 2 minutes each to introduce themselves and their vision for Missoula. And then we will begin the questions. Due to time constraints, there won't be an opportunity for questions from the audience. However, most of the candidates have agreed to stay for a few minutes afterwards if you have a specific question you'd like to ask a candidate. All responses will be timed. Our timer is Gladys Harden, LWV Vice President, who will ruthlessly warn candidates of their time remaining by means of time cards. We plan to end this event in 90 minutes. Let's begin. Mr. Floyd, you have 2 minutes in which to introduce yourself and your vision for Missoula.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity of the Neighborhood Council to put on the forum and give everyone an opportunity to learn who we are. I have been on Ward 6 City Council representative for this area for the last 4 years. The reason I ran was because I felt like government was not responding in an appropriate fashion to the concerns that were being expressed out of Ward 6. I've been a big believer in you can either lead or you can follow. And I've always felt like I had the ability to lead, and I feel like in the 4 years that I've been on council representing this ward, I've done a fair job of that. I think you have to remember when you enter into this process of politics who you are and what you're about. And I think for those of you who were here 4 years ago that I spoke with, visited with as neighbors in this ward, I put out to you that I would be representative of your ward in the fashion that you wanted. I think I can say without reservation, that's exactly what I've done in the last 4 years. I think it brings me skills that will allow me the opportunity with confidence to lead the city in the next 4 years as mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Floyd. Mr. England?
Good evening, and thank you for allowing us to stand before you this evening and hold forth. My name is John Engen. I am a city councilman from Ward 1, running for mayor of the city of Missoula, my hometown. I was born here in 1964. Haven't been kicked out yet, still a little early. And during the course of my 4 years on city council, I've been chairman for the better part of that term of the Plat Annexation and Zoning Committee, which largely deals with land use issues, which largely deals with how we live together in our community. That's been contentious and difficult, and as mayor, I think we can start to smooth some of those bumps in the road, make some choices for the future of Missoula that make good sense. I believe that I bring people together, and I think I've demonstrated that in projects ranging from the compromise we reached on impact fees, on the compromise we reached associated with the Safeway store downtown, on the compromise we reached, with regard to even signage in our town. So that's part of what I believe in, is trying to work together to find middle ground, and I think as mayor I can do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Durazi.
Hello, and also thank you for this opportunity. I'm John Durazi. I am the common person candidate for mayor here in Missoula. And I entered this race because I found it difficult at times to communicate with City Hall whatsoever with what the issues were with the people, their concerns. I've done a couple petitions and things to get some stuff stopped in Missoula. It worked for a while, but it was always the end result that mattered to us. To you guys, I'm sure, are the same as when I say us, I do mean this room and myself. I'm a third-generation Missoulian. I've been in business here in Missoula for over 30 years. I've also been a concerned voter for 30 years in this town. And it's what I believe is time for a change here in Missoula, is to put a city government in that will listen to the people themselves, to listen to everyone and their concerns when stuff is brought to downtown. And that a good, strong mayor, there's going to be a new council. There's going to be 6 new members in council and a new mayor in this town. So if there's time for some change, I believe it's now. And I truly think I'm capable of that job from the experiences I've had in Missoula, that I believe I know that there are some simple solutions to a lot of the things that are out here, and they're not being looked at in a simple manner. That's what I'll try to bring there, simplicity. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Crowley?
Good evening. Thanks for coming. Appreciate the opportunity. You and I have seen some changes in this town over the last few years, and we are facing even more change in the years to come. What we set in motion now will have tremendous impact on our futures, our children's futures, and our grandchildren's futures. I bring 9.5 years' experience of being on the City Council in working between government and its citizens. Over the years, I have been an advocate for my constituents, giving them a voice in the decisions that impact their lives. My goal is to bring that empowerment to all the citizens of this town, to make them feel like they have a voice in the future, that their voice is listened to and respected in regard to the future of this town. I have been tested, making hard decisions on land use and zoning. I've worked for solutions, sitting in committee after committee. I want to take the love and passion that people feel for Missoula and create a vision for our town, neighborhood by neighborhood. That means protecting our environment, strengthening our neighborhoods, and continuing the wonderful vibrancy of this town. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Vallis?
Thank you all for coming tonight. This is just a tremendous turnout, and it shows that you're really interested in your neighborhood. I'm Jerry Ballas. I'm a representative for Ward 4. I'm in second term, so I have gone through the re-election process, and I've learned that people in my ward at least have supported the things that I've tried to do on council. I want to spend a little bit of time, instead of telling you too much about my experience, as to why I'm passionate about my neighborhood and why I work and plan to work to try to keep neighborhoods in the way that they are. 1972, we bought our first house in Ward 4, the south end of the university. It was a small 800 square foot house, but it had some land around it. We added a bedroom, enlarged the bedrooms for our kids. We built a garage to house our cars and to improve things and mostly carry our storage. We did most of that work by our hand. When Mount St. Helens blew, it's always a memo to list, because that was when we had the roof off and we expanded our house. So our neighborhood is important to me, and I I'm running for mayor because the current mayor, I don't think, really supports trying to protect the character of existing core neighborhoods. And that is one of my goals, is to try to make sure that the city listens to our neighbors and the neighborhoods and helps keep them in the character that they are and helps protect the investment that you've made.
Thank you. Mr. Badnack.
Thank you, Sarah. You've heard it before. Thank you all for being here. I'm grateful for the opportunity to come and present myself to you as a candidate to be your mayor. My name is Jeff Badnack. You may know me as the former director of the city's redevelopment agency, where I was director for 18 years. And during that time, I directed an agency whose mission it was to work in partnership with public partners and with private partners, businesses and not-for-profits, to redevelop our communities downtown, to rebuild our riverfront parks and trails. That experience yielded a resume which is on the street. You don't have to hear me tell you about it. You can go look at it and you can see what we did. That experience helped me learn a couple of very important things. It helped me learn to measure my success and the success of my partners. In other words, if my partners in these efforts didn't succeed, I couldn't claim success myself. That's the energy that I will bring to the mayor's office. One of the things that we need to do so desperately in our community is get a handle on the policies that guide our laws and the rules under which we live. As mayor, I'll help the council do good policy work. I'll help them with processes that are inclusive, that invite you into the process. We'll have outcomes that are transparent. People will know how the decisions were made. And then once they're made, I'll see that they're consistently enforced. I don't think people in Missoula want anything less than that.
Thank you, Mr. Badnack. If you want to stand up again, you have the first question. And that question is, do you prefer to pay for city services with user fees, such as impact fees and local option sales taxes, or with general taxation?
Well, I think whenever you talk about the infrastructure and these kinds of improvements, they're very, very expensive. And I would say my answer would be that we would need to have probably a combination. I think the people who benefit are the ones that should pay. As mayor, I would have one very simple rubric. What does it cost? Who pays? Who benefits? And what's fair? Now, collectively as a community, and the reason we live in a city is that collectively we can help one another with the expenses of things like infrastructure, whether it's sewers, streets, sidewalks, parks, for example. And I would say it's probably going to end up being a combination of all those things. New growth certainly should pay its way. It's very hard oftentimes to make that work and still keep housing, for example, to be affordable.
Thank you. Mr. Ballas?
As an architect...
Oh, just a moment. I'm sorry.
A new one.
We're shifting around.
Okay.
I'm going to give you a new question, but you
Okay.
can stand up, please.
This is different.
This is very different. The question is, how would you like to see growth in our valley addressed? Through infill in existing neighborhoods or subdivisions replacing the remaining open space?
Well, I think the question is drawing a conclusion that doesn't necessarily have to be drawn, is that we have to totally rely on new subdivisions. It's pretty obvious that I don't support infill. I have a real problem with boundary line adjustments that I feel that we have a court case that has said that they aren't totally legal the way they're being used, and when you do that, you do have to comply with zoning. So zoning is an important factor in this community. However, I think there's a lot of opportunities, a number of opportunities to find places for housing. We've got the Champion Mill site that we're going to be rebuilding. We've got the project that Jeff's been working on, Intermountain. If we take a look at some of these larger open spaces and work to develop those, we can incorporate some pretty good high-density housing without impacting the character of our neighborhood core. And I think we have to find a way to grow without destroying that neighborhood core. Houses 6 feet apart, I don't think, provide a good living environment.
Thank you. Ms. Crowley?
Yes.
Discuss the potential solutions and timeliness for addressing the problem of the increasing volume of commuter and commercial traffic through our residential streets, specifically 14th and Johnson.
Thank you for that question. I love 14th and Johnson. 14th and Johnson is not unique. Let's face it. Mount Avenue, where I live, right down the street from you, increased traffic, big time. You have to step back and try to get the big picture and figure out, number one, where people are working, how do they get there, what are our options? And the bottom line is, what does all that traffic do to our air quality? We have to give people a reason not to get in their cars if we can. The gas prices are helping. I happen to be on the board of Mr. TMA, that's the Missoula River Valley Transportation Management Association. These are the people who have the iRide van pools. They are helping people from Lolo, from Hamilton, from north of town, come into town in an inexpensive and non-polluting way. I happen to ride a bicycle, so I'm very much interested in giving alternative transportation good PR. Investing in our bus system so that people have options. I guess it's about options. It's about thinking about the big picture and changing our minds about how we get around town and the reason why we would actually change our minds. What we do to our air, what we do to each other through the potential for road rage, you never know. We need to rethink our transportation in this town, and we need to do it together.
Thank you. Mr. Derazi, what is your vision for the urban renewal of Midtown Missoula?
Well, that's a good question for me. My vision for a lot of downtown does rest at the mill site, and I know that there's plans and things going on right now for some density building on the old Champion Mill site. I would like to see that be a full community park you have both bike paths there, the one that runs east and west and the one that runs a little lateral through here from the north to the south and such. And the opportunity would be there for a lot of people to come together, a lot of different organizations to get together. We have a hockey team here that was trying to build an arena, ran out of some money. With some help and things, I believe that there could be an indoor arena there on that ground and a large enough parking lot and stuff to service the Osprey. There could be other ballparks, soccer fields and things. There's a lot of land there. There's a lot of land there. And it would be a wonderful downtown for Missoula on the river to actually be able to utilize that ground for the community itself and not for density building. But that's another issue. As far as Missoula downtown itself goes, it would be wonderful if a person can figure out a way to make a walk around downtown Missoula. You see it in other cities, you see it in places, and it's very pretty. And we have a configuration of streets and such that doesn't really allow all these open ideas to come here to Missoula. So it would take some teamwork, and that's what I would advocate with all the downtown people and all the downtown businesses, is what kind of teamwork can we do to make downtown more viable and lively so that people want to be downtown Missoula. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Engen, your question is about infrastructure. Would you support an infrastructure, comprehensive, or any other type of plan that was produced and supported by a neighborhood? Please elaborate.
Yes, I would. And in fact, I've supported an infrastructure plan that has everything to do with this neighborhood. Pardon me, the Franklin to Fort neighborhood infrastructure plan is in process now, as we like to say in bureaucratic circles. That is, we're trying to make that happen, and your neighborhood is engaged in that. And we moved that process forward first through our Office of Planning and Grants, through our budget process, and through my committee, which is PAZ. We opened that up to hear from neighbors to make sure that we wanted to proceed with this plan, and we heard loud and clear, I think, pardon me, that you folks want sidewalks and curbs and the things that some other neighborhoods have had for years, or that new neighborhoods have as a matter of course through our subdivision standards. So absolutely, I support those projects. They make a lot of sense, and I think as we talk about issues including transportation and redevelopment, they only make more sense. Multimodal becomes a reality when you have sidewalks.
Thank you. Mr. Floyd, your question is about political practices. How would you facilitate an environment to encourage cooperation and compromise on issues that come before City Council?
While I've taken a pretty strong stand on a number of issues that have been before council, I think, frankly, I can honestly say that I've been one of the folks who not only educated himself on the subject so that he could articulate the subject, but has also been willing to identify those issues that would provide for compromise. I feel like I've done as much compromising as anyone on council that's currently seated. When we talked about the Planned Neighborhood Cluster moratorium, it was a difficult issue. It's still a difficult issue because we haven't resolved it. Compromise was, Mr. Charney indicated that he felt like if we were going to simply whack these off, there ought to be some kind of a threshold. The threshold picked was 6 units or greater. 6 units is a significant number because in Montana state subdivision law, that is the difference between a major subdivision and a minor subdivision. Idea being that way, if they were 6 or greater, they would have come to us for review anyway. Unfortunately, we have some very creative developers in this town. There's a 6-unit subdivision being built right over here on 7th and 6th off of Kemp. It won't go through subdivision review, and the reason is it's condominiums, so the land's not being sold or conveyed. That totally sidesteps what the intent was there. That was a very big compromise on my part because that's been a huge issue for this area. Thank you.
And thank you. Ms. Crowley, do you prefer to pay for civil services with user fees, such as impact fees and local option sales taxes, or with general taxation?
Well, I haven't had a lot of preference over the years. I've been paying taxes like you have. We've been paying to make this town the great place it is. And we are so desirable that people are coming day after day. Now, where they get to live and what they put on the ground ought to come at their expense. That's how I believe. We all share in this. And we have to share for the future. But when new growth comes in and people take land, say agricultural land, or they infill in neighborhoods and create impacts, then they need to share, or they need to provide that cost up front for the sidewalks, for the paving of the alleys, for all the things that go with that, fire and police, parks. There's a lot that goes on just in living. We take these things for granted, but that's what having a government created for us does. It provides these services for us so that we can go about our daily business. So I believe it's a combination. We're all paying in so that we have the money to continue to have good service. But I do believe that the folks who are coming in need to pay for that growth.
Thank you. Mr. Badenoch, how would you like to see growth in our valley addressed through infill in the existing neighborhoods or subdivisions replacing the remaining open space?
Well, like Jerry, I think that's kind of a Hobbesian choice, or it's a devil's bargain. You don't necessarily have to take the alternative. 18 years of my career in government was devoted to reusing urban land, redeveloping land. And I think that's a key part of our strategy for our community. We need to look for opportunities within the city to rebuild uses that are right now underutilized, obsolete, and inappropriate. And I think it's been a problem in Missoula. I think everyone knows it's a problem in Missoula when we try to solve our growth issues by shoehorning houses into backyards or into neighborhoods. It's a strategy that in the long run won't work. In order to do meaningful growth, we need to, and I'm going to be very brave and say this, we need to embrace density. But we have to do density in a way that we haven't done it before in Missoula. There are many wonderful, beautiful cities around the world where people live in densities greater than what we see in Missoula, and those cities are beautiful places to live. They have to be planned correctly, they have to be built correctly, they have to be provided with the right services and support, but they can be a great place to live. I think that's part of our solution.
Mr. England, discuss the potential solutions and timeliness for addressing the problem of increasing volume of commuter and commercial traffic through our residential streets, especially 14th and Johnson.
Especially 14th and Johnson. Well, I tell you, I grew up on 2nd Street. My parents still live there. Pardon me. And I haven't really experienced traffic calming in the way that they've recently experienced. They have a beautiful traffic circle now right down the street where I grew up, and it's made quite a difference. That's one of those sort of neighborhood-based pieces of business that we can do with neighborhoods, working with neighborhoods. In the larger picture, more people, more cars, more houses, and a bigger city combines for the perfect storm of traffic. Yeah. And that's one of the things that I'm hearing as I knock on doors and talk to groups like this. What are you going to do about traffic? Well, if I had all the money in the world, there are a number of things I could do, but given our limited resources, I think we have to make some difficult choices. And we have to do some planning. One of the things we've tried to do as we create new neighborhoods is make sure that we don't create neighborhoods that are dead ends, in effect, that are all cul-de-sacs. We've learned from our mistakes in some cases, so we try to create grids, we try to create opportunities. There's discussion of a bypass that's enormously expensive that would go west of town. I don't know if we can get there either, so I think we need to continue to work as we plan to make sure that folks have access and multimodal. Again, you can walk, you can bike, or you can be pushed in a cart. I'll stop now.
Thank you. Mr. Ballas, what is your vision for the urban renewal of, now this is Midtown Missoula, not downtown, Midtown.
Well, I'm trying to figure out exactly where Midtown Missoula is, because Midtown Missoula has been growing. In one town, Midtown Missoula meant the McCormick Park area. The last time I heard Midtown Missoula was actually out at Playfair Park. As the population is growing, Midtown has kind of moved south. So I'm not totally sure what you mean by Midtown. I'm going to take my time. I think Midtown for most people is still along the riverfront and probably the McCormick Park area. And I think we've got a great opportunity to do something down there. With the McCormick Park pool being built as a year-round facility and the play ball, and now the opportunity to really develop the Champion site. We have the ability right now to combine not only parks along the riverfront, to extend our trail system along the riverfront, so we can go from Bonner all the way out to Frenchtown at some point in time. But I see the real key in the Champion Mill site as providing additional housing that is close to downtown, close to services, has access to buses, has access to walkways where you can walk, and I think that's the type of development we need to try to encourage in Missoula.
Thank you. Mr. Floyd, would you support an infrastructure comprehensive or any other type of plan that was produced and supported by a neighborhood?
I would.
I think it's pretty obvious to a number of folks who've been involved in the Franklin to Fort infrastructure plan that I was questioning in the beginning. But the questioning was not whether it was a good idea to have the neighborhood develop its own plan. I think that's the best level to start that planning and have it work up. The questioning is where in the larger scheme of things do we expend the precious dollars that we have for transportation planning or infrastructure planning? And the question was just raised yesterday, or I beg your pardon, yesterday at Plat Annexation and Zoning Committee when we were talking about the interlocal agreement. We've spoken to interconnectivity of streets. We have a large problem on Mullen Road. We continue to expand and annex to the west. There's no interconnecting streets to West Broadway, which is actually an underutilized 4-lane right now. We could have had the person who's been working on our infrastructure planning in that regard as well. You have to weigh in balance what the requirements are and the dollars you have available to make that happen, and then have them work on the highest priority first. Does that mean this is not an important item? Absolutely, it's an important item. The second thing I questioned when we had the infrastructure plan before the neighborhood council meeting was how many folks really wanted what we were setting out as objectives in those plans. Now, the statement was made earlier this evening that, in fact, there was an overwhelming yes. I don't think you can make that statement because nobody voted at that meeting whether they wanted this plan or not, or to the extent or scope of that plan. I think until you have the neighbors have buy-in in what the objectives are, you're maybe spending dollars that you shouldn't for something that maybe the majority really don't want.
Thank you. Mr. Doraze, how would you facilitate an environment to encourage cooperation and compromise on issues that come before City Council?
Well, as mayor of Missoula, I would hope that you're a strong leader and that maybe what you do say can be taken with more than just a grain of salt. The new mayor is going to have an opportunity to start fresh with, there's not going to be any bad blood, hopefully. There's going to be a community focus back to downtown to where council can get along with leadership. I would advocate that on the issues brought forward to council, that perhaps pre-council meeting that you would have your own little agenda to prioritize things, to put a preference, so to speak, to important issues, things that should be a concern for the council, not to waste time on some things that are relatively irrelevant that are taking place downtown. I see that they have no communications, it seems like, at times downtown. They get along good here at the forums. That's good for everybody here. But as one, I see that the mayor should be like a head football coach, and he's got some good assistant coaches and 12 of them around him. And the team we're all trying to guide out is Missoula itself. And that's where you make and break it, is by who you have around you. So the opportunity is here now for new. It's here, it's now. Yeah, the bell's ringing for new. And a good leader can take this town in the right direction. And I'm waiting for some of those other questions.
Mr. Carlos, do you prefer to pay for city services with user fees, such as impact fees and local option sales taxes, or with general taxation?
I guess I definitely believe that we need to find some options to the general taxation process. I've been paying taxes like most of you for a long time, and I've never seen them going down. They're always going up. When I bought my first house, my taxes were pretty low, and my payments, the thing that's increased on them has been taxes, so my payments have doubled over a 20-year period. So I think we need to find some options to the property tax The options that we find, though, I'm not sure that they need to be local, because I think when we do that, we're liable to penalize ourselves. If we're going to have some other optional types of taxes to generate funds, we need to go to the state legislature, and it's a type of tax that needs to be provided on a wider base. If we start implementing too many special taxes in Missoula, what we're going to do is force that some of that money and transactions out to other areas. So we got to be very careful about doing things specifically in one local area. I have some new subdivisions actually pay an awful lot of their cost as they're built. I spent a lot of time as an architect. I've developed a lot of subdivisions or helped people develop them, so I know what some of the real costs are. And so when our new subdivisions, which some of our children are trying to buy into right now, have to pay for streets and sewer and water and parks and all of those improvements, not very many of us that actually bought our house the first time had to pay that price. So we got to find a way to balance it so that we don't drive the cost of housing too high.
Ms. Crowley, how would you like to see growth in our valley addressed through infill in the existing neighborhoods or subdivisions replacing remaining open space?
Let's face it, it's not either or. We have to be honest with ourselves about the projections of the growth that's coming. We have to put the numbers on the table and figure out the best way to handle it. The county is putting sewer in out in the county. When you put sewer in, people can subdivide, and that's what they want to do. The people out in Flynn and Doherty, they wanted to keep their land, but the sewer cost so much they decided they needed to subdivide. In town, infill is the best use of our resources. But it's not what we do, it's how we do it. That's the key. The only thing that we have is our neighborhoods, the unique, historic feel. They tell the story of Missoula. Why would we want to trash our neighborhoods? So we want to keep that character, but we also need to understand that we have to absorb some of the growth. Why don't the neighborhood councils start going out with surveys, figuring out in this neighborhood and all the neighborhoods around town, if we have to take some of the growth, what do you want it to look like? We want to keep as much open space. We want to provide green space around the new development. We want to have parks. We want to have these connecting trails. What are the things at neighborhoods? And each one is different to a degree. So I believe that we just have to be as honest as we can with ourselves. And when we do put a subdivision in, where's the daycare center? Where's the neighborhood store as close as possible? How do we develop communities in those new subdivisions rather than just house after house?
Thank you. Mr. Badnock, discuss the potential solutions and timeliness for addressing the problem of increasing volume of commuter and commercial traffic through our residential streets, especially 14th and Johnson.
When I had a chance to select where I lived 18 years ago, I selected a home that was near where I worked because I wanted to be able to walk to work. I wanted to be able to later ride my bike to work. Like Luann, I'm committed to riding my bike, and I ride it not so much out of my social awareness, but because it's so darn much fun. And I hesitate to tell people that because I'm afraid if they knew how much fun I had riding my bike, they'd make me quit. But now I work at a different job, and I have to take the bus. And I never really rode the bus before this past year. And now I ride it regularly. And one of the things that strikes me is the people who ride the bus with me are regulars. There's very rarely is there a new face. I know everyone. But there are a lot of empty seats on the bus. And the only thing I can conclude from that is people have decided that the bus is for those other people. It's not for me. My car is important. I have to continue driving every day. I can't pick one day a week where I could take another way to work or another way to do my errands. I think we're going to have to solve the problem of increased traffic collectively. We're going to have to find a way to improve our bus service so that more people will find it attractive and convenient. And the way you do that is through greater regularity of routes and more routes. And we have to find ways for people to get more aware about how they use their automobiles. We're going to continue to have people coming to Missoula and causing traffic on our streets as long as it is convenient and as long as it's economically rewarding to them to do so. The price of gas is helping tip the balance, so it's not going to be rewarding to them. But we still need to have a way for people to move around our community. And that's why I think many of us, and some of you in this room, are going to solve that problem by learning to ride the bus with me.
Mr. Floyd, what is your vision for the urban renewal of Midtown Missoula?
Well, first and foremost, I would hope that, and I guess I would define Midtown as the area that folks are looking at with ERG 3, which is the Holiday Village, part of the Slant Streets and Rose Park area. And I'm hopeful that when we initiate that process, that we go out and we include folks who live there, asking them what they would like to see as part of that development. I think there's a lot of great opportunities there for the spaces like Holiday Village, if it went away, to be developed into both a combination of residential and neighborhood commercial. But I would hope that we would involve the neighbors around there to see what kind of a trade-off we might make with them in the design that we actually implement on the ground. I feel like that's been a big part of the problem that we've realized in Missoula with how we've planned for growth. There hasn't been a plan. We haven't had an engaging process with the neighbors that are being impacted. Designers, architects, developers can come up with all kinds of wonderful ideas once you give them their marching orders. I think the problem is that we've never come up with the notion of what those marching orders ought to be. And I'm hopeful that when we initiate that process, in fact, this time we'll do it right and get folks involved that are going to be impacted, and then have a design that the developers and designers and architects can go to work on.
Thank you. Mr. Dorazi, would you support an infrastructure, comprehensive, or any other type of plan that was produced and supported by a neighborhood?
That, I think, would be the best way to be a proponent of, is what the neighborhoods do want. And as a whole, majority should rule, and then that's maybe a forgotten thing in government anymore. But if the neighborhood deems a project is suitable for, I would draw one line here. I would say that the people that get a vote on that issue in the neighborhood to bring it forward would be people that own property in that area and live in that area. That the out-of-state property owners whose property may be developed could be beneficial for them. They get a bigger voice. Sometimes they own more ground. There's always been a segregation of how much land do they own, so how much do they get to have impact with it by. And if it is deemed as a good idea by the people themselves that actually live there, the property owners that live in an area say, we would like to see this happen, we would like to have the infrastructure done, we would like to have these things all done, then the city has to be able to put forward the plan for them to bring it forward, hopefully at an affordable enough cost so the impacts do not put people out of place and put them out of home, and that the property itself will retain a value with the improvements to it. If you have the sidewalk and you have the gutter, you've had to already pay for these things to come in, but your ground is worth more on the other side of the coin if you decide to sell it. But I would advocate for the neighborhoods to be the ones that bring forward these plans and not just developers.
Thank you. Mr. Engen, how would you facilitate an environment to encourage cooperation and compromise on issues that come before the City Council?
Boy, you know, this may come as a shock to many of you, but the 11 colleagues with whom I serve on City Council are not shrinking violets. And I occasionally have an opinion myself, which may be why I'm pursuing this office. I think what I've done as chairman of plat annexation and zoning, and I think what we generally try to do is, while there are bumps in the roads and disagreements and squabbles, we generally treat each other with relative civility, and I demand that as chairman of the committee. I demand that from the folks with whom I serve, and I demand that from the folks whom we serve. And while it doesn't always work exactly the way we hope, I think we make pretty good progress most of the time. The mayor can continue to facilitate that through conversations like this and by setting a tone for the way we conduct ourselves in public life.
Thank you. Mr. Dorazi, do you prefer to pay for city services with user fees such as impact fees and local option sales taxes, or with general taxation?
Well, I would be the guy that makes the builder pay for the stuff that's coming in. We've seen it in the past that somehow the impact fees don't cover what the city has to end up paying. You'll see a bond issue in November for $6 million. Most of it is for a fire station up Miller Creek that was never supplied, that was promised to them upon annexation up Miller Creek, but the money is nowhere to be found. So now they ask the city and the people of the city again for a tax increase so that we can cover our obligations to the people up Miller Creek. So what has been implemented is an impact fee and a shared expense for the overtures, but it seems the impact fees don't pay any part of what's needed for the overtures, and it's always the public that gets to get, you get to pay for it. That's bottom line. Is you guys are going to pay for nobody wants to turn down the fire department for a needed fire station. So that means there's going to be increased taxes for everybody in this town. And it's accountability that's been lost by the city. If they've been collecting taxes from the people up in Miller Creek since they annexed them in, but nobody can say where the money went that was supposed to be earmarked for a fire station that was promised to them when we annexed them. So if there is going to be the development and the impact fees for infrastructure, which include fire and police department, that those need to be provided up front by the developer. They might not make quite as much money on the project, but it won't cost us that much money to live here.
Thank you. Mr. Floyd, how would you like to see growth in our valley addressed? Through infill in the existing neighborhoods or subdivisions replacing the remaining open space?
I came to the office of City Council running basically on the notion that the infill development that was going on was not good for the neighborhood. I think we do need to provide new housing stock, and when possible, we need to keep that as affordable as possible. I think infill was billed as the most appropriate way to provide that housing stock with affordability. Part of what I've articulated in the last 4 years is that is not accurate. Housing costs have gone up. The folks that we really thought we were helping with infill projects, which were low and moderate income families, do not even qualify for most of the homes being built in infill or boundary line relocation projects. Does it help with overall affordability? Yes, it does. But at what cost? Because the neighborhoods that are being impacted, where development happens in really a kind of a pell-mell fashion, there's not, if you have a zone, for instance, we're sitting in an R12 zone, this zone is defined geographically. Whatever happens within that has to meet the zoning. Planned neighborhood cluster comes along and it overlays that, says we change all the rules within that zone. And it applies universally across the city. It doesn't matter whether you're an R1 or an R12, a B, whatever. We need to know as property owners and purchasers of homes what we get when we buy a home. That was taken away 6 years ago. We need to provide for affordability, yes, but I think there's more than one way to do it. Small house, small lot is a way, Increased subsidy of those who qualify as lower moderate income and down payment would be another way. Trying to educate folks with the job skills to be able to meet market rates is another way.
Thank you. Mr. Ballas, traffic. Discuss the potential solutions and timelines for addressing the problem of increasing volume of commuter and commercial traffic through our residential streets, specifically 14th and Johnson.
I think the real key to try to handle traffic is by developing our arterials that have already been planned. We do have a traffic plan. One of the problems I see with 14th and Johnson, at some point in time it was designated as an arterial, but it's never been built as an arterial. So it can't handle the traffic that we're channeling there. So we either got to correct that by making better arterials other places. I see Russell Street needs to be improved. If we can, when we finish that improvement on Russell Street, we will allow people to use that corridor. I guess when I drive around and when I hit the arterials and that places that are designated arterials that are supposed to help me get from one place to another fairly quickly, and that arterial becomes clogged, I find an alternate route. And I find people out throughout Missoula are doing the same thing. When you know there's going to be a traffic jam someplace, you all know what streets to take so you don't get there. So our challenge, I think, is to make sure we have a good traffic plan, we follow through with that plan, and we develop and finish those arterials that we are already on the boards. And it's going to be a little bit at a time because of the cost. But I think if we can all get behind the plan and support the plan, we will eventually get there and we'll approve everything. In the meantime, as we develop some of these arterials, we've got to look at the new design concepts that are being used. The traffic calming concepts and the landscaping that are being placed on them makes the arterials much nicer places to drive. Stevens Avenue is a real good example, which used to be a wide open street and not a very pleasant place to drive. Now with the margins and the landscaping, it is a very nice place to drive, and it's improved the neighborhood.
Thank you. Mr. Engen, what is your vision for the urban renewal of Midtown, Missoula?
My definition of Midtown is pretty similar to Clayton's, and I think the Southgate Triangle folks are part of Midtown. And I think that's part of our third urban renewal district. That's where we're going to attempt to apply some of the tax increment financing magic that helps make downtown a wonderful place, make Midtown a wonderful place. The vision piece, I think, largely has to do with how development can play out there and how interested folks are in making that part of our town work. There are a number of things that are, I think, attractive about it. One is the College of Technology and its proximity. There's opportunity for workforce training there. There's opportunity for lots of cooperation with business. And I think as part of the tax increment financing district, we may have some chance to put in the high-tech infrastructure that we hear a lot about. There are a lot of folks who don't need bricks and mortar as much as they need wireless and in some cases wire. And that's part of what we can do there as well, is create some economic opportunities, some of those good jobs that come from the tech industry. So I think all of those things can kind of come into play there as well. And I don't know if the folks at Holiday Village are all that interested in selling, but a lot of people seem interested in tearing it down and putting something new there. So we'll see if that happens over time as well. They should be encouraged at this point, and maybe ought to get a realtor.
Do you know a good one? Mr. Badnock, would you support an infrastructure, comprehensive or any other type of plan that was produced and supported by a neighborhood?
Infrastructure planning is something that we need to do better in Missoula. And certainly at the neighborhood level, it's important that we involve neighborhoods in doing that work. I think we need to establish minimum infrastructure that we desire in our neighborhoods, whether that's curbs, gutters, sidewalk, parks, landscaping, traffic calming. All those things are important. But we're not kids in a candy shop. We don't get to have it all. So I think it's important that we also do the work with the neighborhoods to figure out what the priorities are. One of my key priorities is sidewalks. I think it's unconscionable in a city that we have places where there are no sidewalks, where in the winter, kids on their way to school are forced to walk in the street. There's nothing more civil than providing your neighbors and your community a shoveled sidewalk in the winter. And we don't have enough opportunity for doing that. I think it's important, as I said, that we involve the neighborhoods in defining what their plans are, what they want. Neighborhoods need to have a voice in this, but they don't get to have a veto. It's up to the city council to take the plans of the neighborhoods and to figure out a way to implement them according to what the neighborhood desires. But that's the work of the government. That's the work of the city.
Thank you. Ms. Crowley, how would you facilitate an environment to encourage cooperation and compromise on issues that come before City Council?
Well, I'm going to ask you a question. How do you do it in your family? That's what we are. That's what the council is. That's what the administration is. It's a family. And how do you get the job done? You sit down and talk. Right now, we've been working in an environment that mostly counts votes. If you've got the votes, you don't really have to worry about the rest of the folks in the minority. How they're feeling, what they think about that, how the vote's going, about all that they represent being in the minority. This is about power sharing. So when you have an issue like the sign issue, you've got to realize that it's basically the community having a conversation. We're having a conversation about this issue. And there's one side, there may be 3 or 4 sides. But number one, you start getting people across the table. You start realizing that their opinions are as valuable as yours. You may think they're crazy for a while, okay. But still, it's like you have to make a commitment from the bottom up. If we're going to have a certain level of civility, I have to make the commitment. I have to expect that commitment from my colleagues. The mayor creates that tone, as it has been said, of civility. And that the minority is as valuable as the majority. And you start having those conversations one-on-one, 3-on-1, bring in 4 or 5, till people feel comfortable and they feel like they can trust the person on the other side of the table.
At this point, we've been through 4 rounds of our 6-round forum tonight. We have 2 more rounds to go. I see some of you people taking notes. I hope you're jotting down questions that you might want to ask individual council candidates afterwards. And so let's go on with our next round. Mr. Engen, do you prefer to pay for city services with user fees, such as impact fees and local option sales taxes, or with general taxation?
I prefer to use federal funding to pay for city services, but that hasn't worked out particularly well in some cases. I think, as others have said, this is really about a combination. I can tell you that I'm a pretty big fan of user fees, and the city's worked pretty hard over the course of the last couple of years to make sure that we charge what we need to charge for the services we provide that are really specific, especially to the building industry. We do that through a couple of methods. One is impact fees, and we've talked about that a lot tonight, and I'm not sure that everybody knows what impact fees really mean. But we passed an ordinance that requires builders of new homes, and in some cases remodels, to pay a fee associated with that can then be applied to buying the big stuff that costs us a lot of money, and it's stuff that many of us have been paying for years. So that's fire stations, it's police stations, it's parks in some cases. So we passed a set of fees that we hope create opportunities, as we like to say, for new development to pay its fair share. The other thing we've looked at is, for a long time, we've charged fees that were probably too low for lots of permitting and that sort of thing. And we had a company come in and help us determine what it actually costs for us to deliver some of these services, and then we made a decision about whether or not you all and we ought to, as taxpayers, subsidize that. Okay? And we made a choice. We will continue to subsidize some fees, but at the same time, we need to recover more of our costs so that you don't get burdened with all of these fees all of the time. So again, it's a combination. It's a tough one. One of the things that I hear pretty regularly is we want more services, and that comes at a price. So that's the struggle, and that's the compromise we continue to have to make.
Mr. Durazi, how would you like to see growth in our valley addressed through infill in the existing neighborhoods or subdivisions replacing the remaining open space?
Well, I don't like to read notes, but I did make some on this earlier, that on your infill, the infill issue is here. I believe the way to address infill is going to be by making a simple, single-page rules and regulations. The committee of who to put those rules and regulations together may take a little bit of time, but it won't be, it would be in the near future anyways. And if you make it a level playing field for everyone, you make minimum requirements of a lot size, you're pretty much eliminating zoning as a residential word in Missoula, and you eliminate all the lawsuits that are tied to the infill issue. So it is here. You can try quality control of it, making it sure that when they do build a house over here that had a bigger lot than, you know, if there was room, but make sure there's room for a yard. Make sure there's room for a kid and a dog back there. Not 4,000 square feet or 3,000 square feet with a little house on it. I mean, a substantial lot that anybody would be proud to live at that house. The out-of-town areas, or the ones that are now being kind of pushed for annexation by Missoula, they're the ones that need to determine their own future. Target Range is taking quite a step at that by being an organized area. As far as open space for development in Missoula, it is very limited. I would definitely be a proponent at looking at moving the fairgrounds and creating an actual natural neighborhood on those blocks that would become available there. But I think with what they've created in town, you're going to have to learn what to deal with it and try to quality control it. It's not going to go away.
Thank you. Mr. Floyd, you have a traffic question. Discuss the potential solutions and timeliness for addressing the problem of increasing traffic, especially in our residential streets, specifically 14th and Johnson.
When we debated ad nauseum the reconstruction of Brook South Russell, one of the things that I did raise as representative of this ward was, without question, it was going to push significant new traffic onto Johnson Street, not only to North, which was what the design was, but north of North, all the way to 3rd. And the unfortunate thing about this lack of planning is it divides the neighborhood, which was basically a homogeneous neighborhood until you put all this traffic through on Johnson. It doesn't make it safe as a crossing street anymore anywhere along Johnson. These are not good situations because, as has already been mentioned, sooner or later the inability of that roadway to accept and maintain that traffic flow, folks start going into the neighborhood as they're no longer to commute down the street at the speed they want to carry on that street. This is not a good thing because now we have new traffic into areas that hadn't seen none of this traffic before. So we first need to be able to design roadways that will not put traffic through the major neighborhoods, and we can do that by actually improving our collector arterials like South Russell. It's been in the works for a long time. I was on that committee. We should be building that roadway now, and we're not. We're not anywhere close to it. We need to look at things like the West Broadway diet, which predictably for that neighborhood will do the same thing. You're going to find folks going through on Phillips and Stoddard and Cooper. It's just not good planning, and we need to prevent that and improve the existing collector arch trails.
Thank you. Mr. Badnack, what is your vision for the urban renewal of Midtown Missoula?
Sometimes when you're in school and you've studied the right page in the textbook, the teacher asks you the question, you can't wait to give an answer. I know the answer to this one, Sarah. The Midtown Plan was a plan that was created by the Urban Renewal District, and as John Engen said, it does pertain to the area of the 3rd Urban Renewal District. I'm very familiar with this plan because I organized it. It was a plan that was created by a team of experts that came to Missoula, sponsored by the Urban Land Institute, one of the most prestigious land use planning groups in the world. The team came here with a very important challenge, recognizing that our underlying street grid system was absolutely destroyed by Brook Street and by the railroad tracks, the Bitterroot Branch Line. I know this because I had an aerial photo in my conference room at the redevelopment agency, and from about 5,000 feet looking down on Midtown Missoula, you can see that the grid system of our city is present there, except it has these 2 crazy diagonal lines through it that cause traffic problems, that leave remainder pieces of property that are too oddly shaped or too small to build on, and create what I call tortured architecture. If you go down Brooks, sometimes you'll see buildings that have very strange angles to them because the property owners are trying to maximize their lot coverage on very strange shaped pieces of ground. The Midtown Missoula vision does involve high tech. It does involve creating connections with the College of Technology. It does involve including the medical fields, medical research that also comes off of the College of Technology. And it also allows for a major change that's going to happen at Southgate Mall. And that's one of that's under the radar, but look for Southgate Mall over the next 10 years to change dramatically, because it's going to.
Thank you. Ms. Crowley, would you support an infrastructure, comprehensive or any other type of plan that was produced and supported by a neighborhood?
Actually, I've had the opportunity to do that. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the area we call River Road, Curtis, Davis. Now, those folks over the last few years have experienced tremendous growth. They weren't ready for it. So as a result, we had a number of cul-de-sacs. We had housing on streets that have no sidewalks or curb or anything. Well, finally, the neighborhood empowered itself and took its destiny into its own hands. And they worked very diligently with our planning office to create an infrastructure plan that was not only aimed at connecting streets so that they weren't destined forever to try to get out on 3rd from Curtis or try to get out on Russell. They tried to connect themselves to get out in other ways. They also created a green infrastructure plan, trail systems, greenways, so that they, when they wanted to walk from one neighbor's house to another, they could walk. They didn't have to drive all around. I believe that they showed the city how it should be done. I support action plans within neighborhoods. The people up in the Wapakea area, they wanted a trail system from Meadow Hill School for the kids. They went out and marked it and found the funds through the city, and they created a trail system for themselves. I believe that we ought to empower neighborhoods and support and encourage. If you've got something in your neighborhood that needs to be worked on, instead of going through this 3-year process plan, pick an item that means something to you and create an action plan, and then the city council can endorse it for you.
Thank you. Mr. Ballas, how would you facilitate an environment to encourage cooperation and compromise on issues before the City Council?
Yeah, this is just a super question, because part of being on City Council is that we all represent different wards. There's 6 wards in this city. They all have different objectives and different ideas on how they want to grow. Each ward has 2 different people representing it. Sometimes those people can agree on things, sometimes they don't agree on it. I was pretty fortunate in that Mr. Charney that I served 6 years with, for the most part, he and I agreed on things that we thought were good for our wards. And as council people, we are elected to represent those wards to the best of our ability, and sometimes that conflicts. I think that's politics. As mayor, you're different than elected wards. You've got to find out how to get people working together. And a couple things that I want to do as mayor is, one, for council people, I want to make sure that council people are involved in some of the discussion processes and decisions that are being made before they actually hit the committee or the council floor. There's a lot of work that is going on in staff right now, and council should be at least involved in some of that. The other thing is, the mayor needs to take a proactive approach as he works with each council. I've never had the mayor really call me in and try to express and discuss an issue that might be controversial. So as mayor, I want to reach out to each one of my council people and bring them into office, and we can talk about some of the issues and find out what we can agree on. Are we going to agree on everything? No. That's part of the nature of living in any place.
Thank you. Mr. Floyd, do you prefer to pay for city services with user fees, such as impact fees and local option sales taxes, or with general taxation?
Well, first of all, I wish that we didn't have taxes at all, but of course then we wouldn't have the services that the city does provide. I think when it comes to taxation, there's a couple of important factors that need to be known. First of all, I think taxes have to be equitable to the largest degree possible, and second of all, I think there has to be a high degree of accountability for those taxes once they're paid. Citizens deserve to know how their money is being spent, on what, and why they're having to pay an increase, if in fact they pay an increase. One of the things that I did vote against when we talked about impact fees was not the notion that impact fees were not a good idea on their face. I think when new development creates an impact, it should be paying for that impact. That's what impact fees really was all about. New development paying for its portion of the increased needs for infrastructure, street, sewer, police, fire. But there was no relief granted to property tax owners when we adopted impact fees. It was just another tax, if you will, with a new label on top of what we were already paying. I think when we increase the tax in any way, shape, or form to any portion of the population, the electorate, there should be some consideration as to what the trade-off was. And I think there's an inherent danger when you have something like impact fees, even though it's got this nice feel to it because you're making the folks creating the impact pay for it. There's a loss of accountability there because these funds kind of drift off. You don't really know because you don't write a check. With your property tax, you write them a check every year. You know how much that is. You may not like it, but you know how much it is. And I don't feel like the impact fees have the degree of accountability that meets the test.
Thank you. Mr. England, how would you like to see growth in our valley addressed? Through infill in the existing neighborhoods or subdivisions replacing open space?
That's a fantastic 2-minute question, and I noticed that I had brilliant answers when everyone else was working on it, but not so much. We need more houses. We need more houses. If we locked the gates today and didn't let another soul in our town, we need more houses. My parents aren't having any more children for lots of reasons, one of which is me, but but lots of people are. And if we want our children to have an opportunity here, we need more houses. We need more houses of all shapes and sizes. We need small houses, we need big houses, we need medium houses, we need houses for all sorts of tastes. We need places for old folks to live and for young folks to live. And that's the struggle that our community is dealing with, given our finite space. So, how do we deal with that? I think a number of ways. Redevelopment is certainly one of them. We do have lots of opportunities still within our city for redevelopment. And there are big spaces like the Champion Mill site that you've heard about tonight. There are smaller spaces. There are smaller industrial spaces that don't make a great deal of sense as industrial uses anymore that can be used for housing. I'm tired of squabbling over tiny houses on tiny lots and houses in alleys. That argument hasn't gotten us anywhere. We need to get together and figure out where we're going to put houses of all kinds for all sorts of people. And in some cases, we can do that out of town as we grow west, and we still have lots of opportunity in town. And I think we need to take advantage of both and have a conversation about how we're going to do it.
Thank you. Mr. Durazi, does the potential solution, discuss the potential solutions and timeliness for addressing the problem of increasing volume of commuter and commercial traffic through our residential streets?
Traffic is a large issue with me. The city and I have been butting heads for years. The first easiest and most timely solution would be reopen South Avenue, of course. That's just the obvious one if you want to take traffic off of these streets now. The other thing is, which I've asked of some, I know these members maybe haven't been on council long enough to know when I asked, but to get the semi-tractor trailers out of Missoula. We don't know what the purpose of them are. I do know that even Higgins Avenue has a highway definition to it, and that there's some government subsidies paid to the city of Missoula for use of our highways, which include Higgins, which include Russell Street, which include 5th and 6th Street going over Madison Street Bridge. And I say you make the semis that come into this town use Reserve Street. That was a design of that Reserve Street in the first place. You're going to relieve traffic off of here. You guys speak of Johnson Street. Well, I guarantee you that the traffic between Mount, which turns into 14th, which turns back into Mount, that the traffic on that, on the increase since the South Avenue realignment, has been staggering. You'll see that also on 39th Street for an east-west travel somehow to get east and west in this town now. They didn't make quite the same solution to the Southwest and or to South Avenue and Brooks and Russell as I had proposed to this city years ago, was to relieve traffic to that area at that time. Reserve Street did relieve traffic, but they need to regulate now that the semis do not get to come through town. You have commercial traffic you're talking about here in your neighborhoods. Put it out on Reserve Street.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Crawley, what is your vision for the urban renewal of Midtown Missoula?
First of all, I don't think we should let Mr. Badenoch out of here until he tells us what's going to happen to Southgate.
They're going to move it, Luann. They're going to move it.
Anyway, Midtown. And I live fairly near Holiday. As I recall, it stretches from Brooks, near Mount, all the way down Brooks to Reserve. And it goes off in either direction, towards the mall, the Forest Service land. And we had to declare it blighted in order to get this set up. But this is going to be an amazing opportunity to reinvent ourselves all the way down that corridor. So these businesses can become new again, the ones who want to stay there. Any construction they do, that tax increment comes back into the district and allows more development, better development. It's a chance to think about landscaping, green spaces, trails. The most important part, I think, is this opportunity to mix commercial on the bottom and residential above it. That's going to bring some density down there, But it's going to be like in those big cities where the sign says, if you lived here, you'd be home now. I used to see that a lot in the traffic in Boston. Anyway, I think this is a great opportunity, and it should provide the neighborhoods, especially, because we don't want to just treat that as a new invention. We need to incorporate what's around it and bring it in to the mix as well.
Thank you. Mr. Ballas, would you support an infrastructure, comprehensive, or any other type of plan that was produced and supported by a neighborhood?
In general, a plan that isn't supported by the neighborhood will never go anyplace. So it's critical that that neighborhood gets input into that plan and buys into it. A couple challenges that you have and one exception that you have. If the plan coming out of the neighborhood isn't totally supported by the neighborhood, people outside the neighborhood have a problem trying to understand that plan. And I'll be quite frank right now, some of the information that I'm getting out of the Franklin to the Fort neighborhood on their infrastructure plan, I seem to be getting mixed signals as to where it's going. So I think the challenge that you have in your neighborhood plan is to make sure that you all come to the table and start working together. And working together, you can do a whole lot more than you can if you keep nitpicking and fighting about the plan. The plan is critical. We also had a north side, west side plan, and that went through quite a process, about a 3-year process. And it's a good plan for the neighborhood. It's got one problem with it. It's got a major city arterial going through it, and it's got some major city community projects in it, such as Safeway and St. Pat's and city shoplands. So there's one caveat that you have to any plan, that people on the city council and in the administration have got to look at those plans and really find out and make determinations as to what's good for the whole community. And it's one of the reasons why I supported the Safeway in St. Pat's, which conflicted a little bit with what the neighborhood wanted, because I thought that there's a better good for the whole neighborhood, the whole community, if we can find a way to support St. Pat's and help them grow and develop the medical community that we need to support the whole economic infrastructure of the whole community. And that's the one exception that government has to look at, is what is the plan good for the entire community as it is for the neighborhood.
Thank you, Mr. Ballas. Mr. Badnock, how would you facilitate an environment to encourage cooperation and compromise on issues that come before City Council?
This is a great question. Ever since Luann's answer, I've been thinking about this, and you'll recall she talked about that we're a family. Well, I grew up in a family of 10 kids and 2 parents. My family was the size of the city council. Believe me, you don't want your city council to run that way. I mean, I love all my family today, but when I was younger, that was not the model. In the alternative, I would use as my model someone that I think most of us in this room would agree is a political hero of most of ours, and that's Mike Mansfield. Mike Mansfield was somebody who would reach across the table with someone who didn't agree with him and listen and try to find ways to work together. Not so that Mike could take the credit for anything. If anything, he was great at not taking credit for things that he was able to accomplish. And I think that's what the mayor can do. I'm not looking to be mayor to pick fights with anybody on the city council. As a matter of fact, if I'm elected mayor, the first thing I want to do is go to the city council person who is least like me and offer my hand and ask the question, okay, you're elected, I'm elected, what can we do together for our city? What can we do together to make this place worth living in? And that's what I think we can do. I would invite the city council in to meet with me. I would go to them if necessary to have the conversations that's important to get the people's work done.
Thank you all. This does conclude our forum. My sincere thanks to every candidate up here for their commitment of time and effort that they have shown to give to the city that they love. You all have a difficult choice, but you do need to vote on September 13th. And thank you all to the Franklin and Fort Southgate Triangle neighborhoods for sponsoring this.
We're actually done earlier than we anticipated, and I hope the candidates are going to stay around, and people, I'm sure, have more questions. But before we go anywhere, I want to acknowledge a lot of people that helped out tonight, especially the candidates for coming. It's really wonderful. They're able to hear questions that were generated by our neighborhood and take the time to listen to that. And I know you have a very busy schedule with these forums, so we really, really appreciate that. But also thank the church for we've been having our neighborhood council meetings here for several years now, and having this meeting here is just a wonderful, wonderful asset to us in the neighborhood. I want to thank a lot of people that helped with advertisement of this, the community service program. How many people knew about this event through flyers that were delivered to your doors? Yeah, it's a wonderful program. We've been working with them on advertising a lot of our Jerry Ty and Jim Hossauer set up our sandwich boards, and Hans Christensen set up sandwich boards in their neighborhood as well. So hopefully we're really helping facilitate involvement and communication by making these events available to you all. Maryland Marler for advertising not only this event, but all the events via email. And if anybody in here in the Franklin and Fort neighborhood isn't on the email list and wants to get notification, contact her after the meeting. I especially want to thank the question committee, which was David Gray, Heather McMillan, and Hans Christensen. These folks solicited and compiled questions from both the Franklin and the Fort and Southgate Triangle neighborhoods through a variety of avenues, and compiled the questions and really set up this entire forum. So if it wasn't for them, especially David Gray, this wouldn't have happened tonight. Also want to thank MCAT. This is going to be broadcast on Monday. We don't know the exact time yet, but if people are interested, you can probably contact MCAT tomorrow and find out. So thanks to Ron and Craig for running the show here. And thanks to League of Women Voters, Sarah Busey and Gladys Hart, were wonderful moderators and time members tonight. And something like this can't happen without diligence on their part. So I appreciate that. Also want to thank Lois Ryman and Carol Ulrich for providing the refreshments tonight, especially the homemade treats. So thanks again for everyone.